Broadcasting live from our studio in Boston with presentations from prominent industry vendors, Solutions Review presents Data Demo Day, a virtual trade show for data management and analytics.
I'm Doug Atkinson here at Solutions Review, and welcome to another Data Demo Day. Over the next 3 hours, we'll be offering you an inside look at 3 of the top data technologies available today. And we've assembled another strong lineup for you. 3 solutions, each presenting a compelling value proposition across master data management, data catalogs, and data analytics. First up, Tamer. And they're a great solution to lead us off with because Tamer's cloud-native solutions offer an effective alternative to traditional master data management tools, using machine learning to do the heavy lifting to consolidate, cleanse, and categorize data. Tamer is the foundation for modern data ops at organizations like Toyota, Santander, and GSK, and they help to prioritize high-impact data management projects within your organization and build a business value framework for cloud MDM. And we're joined by Louise Baldwin, Solutions Director at Tamer, and Richard Lewis, Sales Engineer. Louise, Richard, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks very much for having us.
Thanks, Doug.
Well, I know master data management is a classic business term, and I also know that it means a lot to you guys because you very much like to talk about mastering data. Louise, can you just give us a little sense of kind of where Tamer's coming from with regard to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we think about mastering data, it's really coming back to the kind of core challenges that we're solving from a data perspective. So we can think of it not only from a unification perspective of taking data from across sources to create that single view, but also enriching it, thinking about it from a quality perspective when we think about master data management. So looking forward to getting into some of those principles in more detail as we go and kind of expanding further.
Well, excellent. Well, it's always a pleasure to have a hot solution like Tamer join us for these types of events. I'm going to step out of the way. I'll come back in about 35 or 40 minutes with some questions, and you'll provide some answers. But otherwise, I know, Louise, you're going to give us a little bit of an overview of Tamer, and then Richard's going to come in and give us a demo. So I'll let you guys take it from here and talk to you in a bit.
Thanks, Doug. So yeah, I'm looking forward to getting into it. So I'm just going to share my screen. So jumping right into it and touching on more of kind of the core problem that we're actually solving. What is it that Tamer does? Well, last month, there was an overview in the Wall Street Journal about Jane Fraser, so Citigroup's new CEO, and the tasks ahead for her and the bank. And what was the biggest challenge, essentially, that they hit home on was tackling the data for regulators and ultimately the call from regulators for better data. And I think the quote within it that really hits home at the pain point that we're tackling at Tamer is that the regulators complained about that the bank essentially lacked clear data about customers. So Citigroup had never built a unifying customer identification system across its businesses. Fixing that, they said, would help appease regulators and help the bank deepen their relationships. And this is at its core the problem that Tamer really solves. So creating a mastered, unified, clean and accurate view of key entities for an organization. So we mentioned customers, but also other key entities like suppliers and products, but really whatever the key entities are for the business as a whole. And it's not just banks like Citigroup that are facing this challenge. We really see this problem across industries. So why does this problem exist? So when we look at the data management landscape today, big data is really no longer the primary challenge facing organizations. So we've seen tremendous progress in bringing together data at scale, moving from traditional data lakes and data warehouses and traditional MDM to cloud data platforms, and really seeing the benefits as well of cloud elastic compute that goes with it. And so we've seen this in the growth of the major cloud providers. But while organizations have overcome the challenges of data scale and really optimized infrastructure with huge levels of investment, the quality challenge remains. So we say big data is no longer the real problem, bad data is. And so seemingly simple targets, like we touched on with Citigroup, gaining that simple view of customers can often seem impossible. The explosion of analytics tools and point solutions around this as well, often in ways can contribute to the problem because it's furthering these incomplete views, and they can become stale quite quickly as the data sources change. So often the data that's actually sitting in so-called mission critical systems like CRMs and ERPs isn't actually trusted by the decision makers that are using it. And so the critical piece that's needed are next generation data management solutions that address speed, scale, and quality through a data ops approach. And so Tamer is part of this new ecosystem of companies where a data ops approach is at its core. So working with lots of Global 2000 customers on their data and analytics initiatives, we've seen that single vendor, single platform data processing approaches largely fail. So they can't keep up really with the advancements from a tech perspective, and often end up, trapping their users in this kind of locked in sunk cost mentality. Working with some of our customers who lead in their industries like Google and Blackstone, we've seen how these next generation solutions really focus on describing how people, process, and tools can come together to deliver successful initiatives. So a true data ops approach promotes agility, continuity, collaboration, interoperability, and scale. And so when you're thinking about the ecosystem as a whole and where we sit, this is where we can be found. So within that sort of modern cloud-based approach, data ops approach to data management. And so what we specifically do within that is naturally MDM. So focusing on the mastered data element. So a lot of our customers have previously made attempts at MDM, but have been burned by unfulfilled promises. So the core goals that MDM promises really apply today more so than ever, right? In terms of unification, in terms of the accuracy needed within the data, in terms of elements like stewardship. But the execution also needs to align with the realities of where data management is today. And so we achieve those core goals of MDM, but we do so with a data ops driven cloud native machine learning approach to how we master. And Richie's going to touch on this in a lot more detail in the demo and kind of bring those concepts to life. When we look at who we're working with, so we're working with many leading enterprises and organizations to tackle core sort of master data challenges. So including J&J, Santander, and Blackstone in the financial services space, from Google to the US Air Force. So all really focused on this problem of creating a unified, accurate data view across mission critical entities. And typically we're taking data from dozens to literally hundreds of ERPs, CRMs, and ad hoc data sources to create this single golden copy view really. And it often sits at the backbone of so many of those digital transformations that are really top of mind across industries at the moment. When we focus on success, we're obviously very focused on timelines. And so with an agile approach, we really focus on measuring that success, in weeks and months, not years. So to put this in context, here's the high level end-to-end flow of where we sit. So, starting out on the left-hand side, at our core, we take disparate data records about an entity. And so we'll walk through this example with Google across multiple systems, where schema or attribute names are labeled differently, where we could have duplicate records, where there are also inconsistencies within the data, and we'll deliver back to you this holistic golden record view. So if we look at the single entity example where Google is our customer, and we're looking to create a holistic view of the data. So we'll walk through the steps. So data curation. So here we're really tackling the schema and entity resolution, recognizing that data isn't always labeled consistently across systems. Often it can be intensified by outside sources, if your company's gone through M&A activity. Customer names within that are also entered inconsistently often. So here in this example, we have Google Mountain View, we have Google Inc. Palo Alto. We also have the parent company listed as Alphabet. And so through Tamer's machine learning approach to mastering, we're able to recognize the matches despite a lot of these underlying inconsistencies. A core part of this process is feedback. So enabling that human input, subject matter input, essentially, because we do take a machine learning approach. And so that human input essentially decides how the data should look. And it's doing it in a scalable way through machine learning. So reducing a lot of that typical sort of manual effort that goes into doing it. So, this Google example, how do we view Google as a customer? How do we want to see them? So we can think about, is it by site location? Do we want to focus on the legal entity or parent company? We have this sort of breadth across customers, but ultimately it comes back to how the data is actually being managed. And then enrichment. So the ability to leverage external data sources to augment your internal data and give you a complete view. So again, with Google, ensuring that the address information is actually correct. So the end result that we're delivering is this holistic view of Google Inc. shown in the format that the business wants it with trusted data. The most important thing for us is always putting the data to work, right? It's not about the data sitting in the system, it's how you're actually going to go and use it. And so the final step is publishing. So whether it's feeding it to analytical tools like Click or Tableau or Looker, or for more operational use cases, again, thinking of your Oracles, your SAPs, your CRM systems that are used day in, day out by the business. So we always as well try and bring it back to what we're solving at the end of the day. Why does it ultimately matter that you have master data within the business? So our solutions are aligned essentially to the most important business critical data. So customers we're going to focus on in detail today with Richie in the demo, but also other entities like suppliers, parts, and products. And you can think about this data, in terms of the scale of the enterprise impact. So customer data, like literally driving millions of day-to-day decisions for thousands of employees across enterprises, as well as often driving the most important strategic decisions that management are making that are ultimately impacting the bottom line. So we talk about bottom line impact from sort of three elements: driving growth, reducing risk, or lowering cost. I'll kind of come back and revisit these themes as we go. On top of those core business benefits, we also see a large efficiency gain. So we would typically see a 90% reduction in the manual effort for our machine learning approach to master data compared to a lot of this more traditional solutions that are rules-based and that ultimately end up taking a huge amount of manual effort to manage, and essentially that effort just growing with complexity naturally over time as more data sources are added. For most organizations that we work with, we do often start with customer data because if you don't understand your customers at the end of the day, it's going to be difficult to understand supply chain or what products need to be built. It just has so many ripple effects really throughout the enterprise that's where we often start, and that's what we're going to focus on for our demo. So jumping into that customer data problem, so it exists, but really not for lack of effort. And when we look at the typical paths of our customers, there's normally sort of two key paths that people go down. The first is a path with IT generally, who are desperately trying to centralize, to put the data into data lakes, attempting rules-based MDM approaches, and really typically executing very well from an actual sort of centralization perspective, from a unification perspective, but really just not meeting the needs of the business when it comes to quality and classification and governance too within that. So the data is ultimately not usable at the end of the day. And that fuels the second path, right, which is departments within the business often going rogue. So with customer data, we can think about departments like sales, marketing, finance, risk, right? All who are trying to tackle those core data issues within their core systems. So be it CRM cleanups, it could be customer data platforms under marketing, it could be ERP migrations. And it does help plaster over the problem, but often it's avoiding the core issue. And so it furthers this problem of silos growing within the business. It can sometimes contribute to having more additional disjointed views and additional silos within the business as sort of these singled out efforts essentially to master the data go stale. And so focusing again on customers, how do we actually approach it? What's different about how we think about customer data specifically? So we really focus on an enterprise view, but scale around how the business actually sees customers, and so how that data is used at the end of the day. And so we will take data from all the core systems that you're used to. We mentioned the CRMs with sales, ERPs with finance, marketing automation tools, the flexibility to support the multi-channel approach to customers that is just so common today, but to do that with a more sort of scalable approach. So from a product perspective, there's kind of 3 core features specific to how we think about customers as well that we really want to kind of emphasize. So the first is a Tamer ID. So this is a unique ID linked to the golden record view that is used across the organization to ensure that the customer is persistently tracked and captured. So the second is hierarchy classification. So again, that ID linking back to the overall customer hierarchy. So we have the flexibility, again, to master based on the view that you want. So whether you want to create a hierarchy that's based on location, for example, or whether you want to do it by ultimate parent. And the third bucket is enrichment. So we have built-in data enrichment in product so that you can enhance your customer view. It's ultimately recognizing that often companies don't have the cleanest data in-house. And so by enriching, you're really ensuring that you're keeping your data accurate and up to date. And when we think about what this boils down to from a benefits perspective, so our data ops driven approach really leads to improved match accuracy. So with lower false positives. So we can think about, the struggles of really achieving high accuracy through those traditional rules-based approaches. Also lower total cost of ownership, which is also so essential when thinking about all of the different sort of touch points and manual effort. And then thirdly, the flexibility to scale and change with the business. So, we're very much partnering for the long term and building as part of a flexible architecture. So that is really critical because it's so often that solutions appear to work in the short term, but when things get changed up by the business, you need that flexibility to stay up to date. All right, so that was enough of the high level overview. What we're here for ultimately is to show you Tamer in action and to demo. So I'm going to hand it over to Richie, who is going to lead us through the demo.
Thanks, Louise. So over the next 15 minutes, you're going to see 3 things. First, we'll show you why mastering your customer data is essential for improving day-to-day decision-making when using CRM tools such as Salesforce. Next, we'll show you how we master our customer data in Tamer using human-guided machine learning. And finally, we'll show you how this mastered data can drive analytics, leading to critical business insights. So yeah, you can stop sharing now, Louise, but I thought this slide was perfect for introducing the demo. To start off with, in the CRM, this demo looks at Shield Inc., a B2B semiconductor company that's trying to capture a 360-degree view of its customers, but struggling to reconcile data sources and tackle data inconsistencies to gain a true customer view. Lenovo is one of Shield Inc.'s most important customers. Shield Inc.'s relationship manager, Anjali, is the manager for the Lenovo US account. And Anjali has an account review meeting with Lenovo in the US to negotiate contracts for the year ahead. She's primarily been dealing with their manufacturing plant in Whitsett, where the relationship appears to be thriving, but now she wants to make sure she can expand the account to other locations. She wants to look for opportunities to upsell in the account hierarchy by sales region and across the corporate parent, and come into the discussion armed with information on product sales so that she can recommend relevant products across the account. As a sales rep, the CRM tool is her natural starting point to find the information she needs. In this case, it's Salesforce. Here she's come to the specific account page for Lenovo in Whitsett, but it's a very limited view. That there's no revenue information flowing through, which means Lenovo Witsit is actually listed as a non-active customer, even though she knows that they're a major customer. Lenovo United States Incorporated is listed as the parent account, so Angelique can actually click into the hierarchy to view what is the full account hierarchy for Lenovo. We can see it's a long list of accounts associated with Lenovo United States in multiple locations, both US and international. Some of these actually, appear to be duplicates. And it's making Angelique's life very hard, actually. It's hard to make out, what the different account locations are. Her original goal was to identify opportunities to cross-sell to other US Lenovo accounts, but she's struggling to see those opportunities amid the mess. She's now concerned about not having basic information for the account review at Witsit, and she's worried about jeopardizing the relationship. The issue here is, of course, messy data in our CRM. But not only that, Shield Inc. is a company that's grown through acquisition, and they've multiple ERPs and CRMs, as well as data on indirect sales received from distributors, sometimes sent in spreadsheets and often extremely messy. So the information Angelique needs exists, but it's scattered across various siloed data sources in business departments, from sales, marketing, finance, and risk. The data's there, but it's completely scattered. The solution to all of this is data mastering. So let's look at the same hierarchy account page, but after Tamer has mastered all of Shield Inc.'s customer data. We can see straight away it's a much cleaner view. We have one instance of Lenovo per location, and we're including the parent hierarchy. It means that as a sales rep, Angelique can now see exactly where the account sits within the wider group and recognize that Fujitsu and Motorola are part of the same Lenovo group. Now, when she clicks into the specific Lenovo Witsit account, she can see much richer information flowing through. She now has visibility on the total run rate revenue of 8.4 million and the average discount rate of 2.7%. She can see the direct sales and the different products that have been purchased, which help Angelique to enter the account negotiation better armed for upsell. All of this data comes from the output of Tamer customer mastering. And not only is Tamer providing the complete cleansed set of values, it's also providing a Tamer ID, which is a new universal customer identifier for use across all of Shield Inc.'s enterprise applications. If I click on the Tamer ID, it will bring me through to the Tamer user interface. Here in the Tamer UI, we can see the golden record for Lenovo and Witsit. Golden records are one of the outputs of a Tamer process called customer mastering. Golden records data sets are trusted sources of clean, harmonized, and enriched data that can feed any enterprise application, whether that be CRM systems such as Salesforce or analytical dashboards, which I'll show you an example of later. We can curate golden records in this UI if we like, but by default, each golden record is populated automatically by Tamer with data originating from one or more source records. We can click on the golden record to see those original source records. Here we see 8 original records that make up what we call a cluster. A cluster is a group of records that all represent a single distinct customer. We can see here that these records come from a variety of different source systems. For example, Marketo, Salesforce, SAP. We also have some external data from Dun & Bradstreet. All of these data sources, which were previously siloed, have been brought together to create a unified data set of golden records. And because Tamer gives you the cluster information as well as the golden record, you get the data lineage, which allows you to link the golden data back to the original sources. Shield Inc. tried to do something like this in the past using a traditional MDM tool, but the issue they had is that they weren't able to match these source records together as being the same customer. And so without being able to match them, they couldn't unify them to get the golden record. This is because the traditional MDM tool was heavily based on rules. And this rules-based approach doesn't work very well when there's a lot of data variety. For example, you can see that none of these source system IDs are the same. The names have slight variations, such as Lenovo Co., Lenovo PC. There are abbreviations and misspellings in the street address, and some of the fields are blank as well. Now, you might be able to solve this with rules if it was just 8 records. But we're not creating a golden record only for Lenovo here. We're doing this for every one of Shield Inc.'s 270,000 customers. So the overall scale of data variety here is enormous. And with a traditional approach, you find yourself having to develop hundreds, sometimes thousands of programmed rules to try and handle every possible type of variation. And not only do these rules become unmanageable, but they still don't work. So how does Tamer do this? Well, we know it's tricky for rules, but as human beings, right now, we can look at this data, and by simply glancing at the values, we can confidently say that these are all the same customer. For humans, it's easy. We're just not fast enough. And so on our own, we don't scale. So that's why Tamer uses an approach based on human-guided machine learning. Instead of developing lots of complex rules, you simply give Tamer a few examples, and Tamer will learn to think like you do. So let me show you how Tamer's ML-based customer mastering workflow works so you can understand how it works. The first step is to register your source data sets. Here we see 23 disparate data sets from a variety of different source systems. What they all have in common is that they contain information about customers. So we need to unify all of this data if we're going to have the complete picture. If you look at the tabs across the top, they represent the journey of a customer mastering project. First is the source data sets, as I mentioned. Now, since these data sets come from different source systems, they each have different structures. You can see they have different numbers of attributes, and these attributes are all named differently in each system. So the next step is schema mapping, where we align all our source data into a single unified schema so that everything is lined up and we can start doing comparisons. In the Unified Dataset tab, we can preview our unified data, and then we have the Pairs tab, which is where we start training the machine learning. So let's jump to the Pairs tab to see how this is done. I'm going to filter to my assignments, and then I'm going to select a pair. This is what we call a pair. It's 2 records side by side, and we're teaching Tamer how to automatically identify matching pairs and non-matching pairs. Since Tamer's already received some training, Tamer's able to give an answer. Tamer thinks this is a match. But we can give feedback to Tamer. We can say, yes, you're right, this is a match. Or no, it's actually not a match. And then Tamer learns from this input, and so the ML model becomes more accurate. So who gives this feedback? Well, you can see it's a simple matter of looking at the data and then clicking either match or no match. And so you don't have to be a data scientist or a developer to train Tamer's ML. The best person to give this kind of feedback to Tamer is what we call the subject matter expert, someone who knows the data domain and how this data will be used. In essence, someone who knows about Shield Inc.'s customers. You might ask, why do Shield Inc. SMEs need to be involved at all? Why can't Tamer just provide a black box that does everything? The reason is because customer mastering can be subjective. What Shield Inc. call a single distinct customer, another company might say is 2 different customers. It depends on how they run their business. So although Tamer can provide pre-trained ML models to kickstart the process, SMEs will always have the option to review what Tamer is doing and give feedback to Tamer. This gives Shield Inc. the confidence that Tamer is behaving as they would like it to do. And this is very flexible. Shield Inc., if they like, can run multiple customer mastering models in order to have different views of their customers. You can see why this might be tricky to solve with rules. A lot of the fields don't match, but they have various degrees of similarity. Some of them are very similar, and some of them are blank. You can imagine the number of possible combinations of similarity here is infinite. Trying to write rules to handle all the different cases and not contradict each other is a massive design effort in itself. Tamer's approach is much more agile than the rules-based approach. Instead of having to spend months designing everything up front, you can just send the data straight through Tamer, immediately start looking at the output, and then tune the model by giving simple feedback to Tamer with simple yes, no examples. So coming back to the workflow, Tamer has learned to identify matches and non-matches. And from this, it can group the records into what we call clusters. So this brings me to the final tab where we can review these clusters. You can see, if I remove this filter, you can see Tamer has taken 672,000 records from those 23 raw data sources and has grouped them into 270,000 clusters, where each cluster is a single distinct customer. And if I filter back to my assignments, here we have that Lenovo Witsit cluster again, which is the same cluster we were looking at earlier on the golden record screen. Okay, so now for some analytics. The master data not only feeds operational applications like Salesforce or SAP, but it also feeds analytics that empower key decision-making on the accounts. Angeli's not the only set of eyes on Lenovo. They're a key account, so the CRO and senior management want to be able to review the account performance. Decent account-level analytics were virtually impossible before we had Tamer mastered data. Nobody had trust in the data due to duplicates and poor data quality, and important fields on sales metrics were missing. If Angeli looks at the dashboard now for Lenovo Group, she's now armed with all the key information to enable cross-sell. She can drill down to the account hierarchy to view all accounts within Lenovo Group by pairing an ultimate site location. She can now see that as well as having the Morrisville account for cross-sell, there's also opportunity to expand to Motorola Mobility Chicago. She can also make informed recommendations for what to sell. She now has visibility on the products purchased by the Witsit site, as well as the entire Lenovo corporate family. She knows what product ranges are most popular. There are 3 products that stand out across the Lenovo Group: the Ava 500, the Ava 938, and the HAL 329. So she can use this as a starting point for recommendations with the Morrisville and Motorola Chicago sites. Angeli now has a plan for how to drive account cross-sell and ultimately grow the revenue for the account. If we scroll down further, we get a sense of the breadth of analytics that's been unlocked by this master data. Now, there are lots of great analytic tools out there, but they all share the same problem. Without the correct data, they're useless. Tamer ensures that across the enterprise, all analytical reports, dashboards, and operational systems can be fed with clean, up-to-date, harmonized data. Data that can be used immediately and effortlessly, and more importantly, data that can be trusted. Yeah, so just to recap on what we saw today, we looked at the positive impact that Tamer customer mastering can have on day-to-day operations using CRM tools such as Salesforce. We saw how customer mastering is done in Tamer using a unique agile approach based on human-guided machine learning. We then focused on the analytics that mastering enables, and most importantly, how the data can inform key strategic decisions and ultimately drive significant return for the business. And with that, I'll pass the presentation back to Louise.
Fantastic. Thanks, Richie. All right. So Richie really helped, I think, to bring some of the concepts to life. I think it always makes a difference actually seeing it in product. But we're going to chat on a couple of the features that he touched on in more detail. So, our machine learning approach. So want to look at this in a little bit more detail and kind of explain how we do it compared to kind of the traditional approaches. So what we typically see is this rules-based approach to creating master data. So really often a time-consuming process that relies on iteration of rules. So at its most basic level, you can think of it as the if-then statements. And it tends to be fine, with small amounts of data, you can logically rationalize your way through it. But what we see time and time again is that it breaks down at high volumes of data. So as the amount of rules needed escalates, it really becomes unmanageable. So really this kind of tangled web of rules that ends up taking huge effort from the team to ultimately manage. So our approach automates a significant proportion of that data mastering process. So it enables subject matter experts to provide the input, but input that can ultimately be scaled. So rather than asking them to develop rules for every possible data iteration, it's really focusing on those high impact opportunities that Richie brought us through. And so we really focus on this point, but time matters. And so it is ultimately boiling down to master data in weeks and months instead of the years that we typically see take through the traditional approaches, really to get things properly up and running. I think another concept that we want to touch on again is the hierarchies that we look at. So Richie in the demo talked about this example with Lenovo. Here again, we've kind of built it out just to show you kind of the image of what it looks like from an Apple perspective. So looking at those messy underlying records and thinking about all the different ways that you can classify the relationship. And so we typically see sort of three common approaches, though it does vary among our customers. So sales hierarchies, they're often based on location or by sales channel. Financial hierarchies, there you could be thinking about different measures focused on credit terms and contract terms for how you want to think about who is a customer. And then the third, so the corporate hierarchies. So their information can be critical, like who are the subsidiaries or headquarters or ultimate parents. And so thinking through the sort of legal identifier for who the customer is. And so our flexibility with hierarchies, it really comes down to a few of our sort of core approaches. So, that machine learning approach that we keep coming back to is really core to that flexibility from a mastering perspective, because we're leveraging the team's input based on how they manage. Our location and sort of site-based approach, which is a very common across our customers, it also allows them to take advantage of our geospatial capabilities as well. Another common approach is corporate hierarchies, and there again, taking advantage of our enrichment capabilities really enhances that. So the enrichment part of it as well is a really important aspect. So we have built-in data enrichment capabilities, including third-party enrichment services. So for example, US address validation through USPS, a phone validation through the phone carriers, and URL enrichment through Bing. So our data standardization capabilities include normalizing country codes for consistencies. So simple things that can be impactful, for example, consistently showing the United States as USA. And it can be a game changer for messy data, particularly where there's a lack of trust in the underlying data. And so we started with this theme of, the issue is really about bad data, not big data today. And I think looking at the output of graph databases helps bring that point to life. So, visualizations are really only as good as the data behind it. So in this example, we're looking at the data set for an organization, this case coded as DabJam, to empower know your customer ownership and relationships. So on the left-hand side view, in the before view, there are 15 distinct entities that are unique, captured separately within the database, no clear relationship established. On the right, we have mastered customer entities and built relationships. So we're showing here how the view changes post-mastering when you've established the core underlying connections between those records that were before treated separately. And so it's fine when we show it in a simple example like this, where we've isolated the entity, but you can imagine thinking about that left-hand view when it's mixed in with not thousands, but millions of other records. It's becomes a nightmare to try and figure out what the actual relationship is. And so how do we actually generate value? Why does all of this matter? At our core, it's about enabling faster, cleaner, and more robust data to drive decisions for the business. So the ML and data ops approach really does change what's possible from a time efficiency perspective and from an accuracy perspective. And so boiling it down at the three core levels, we're driving business outcomes and ultimately coming down to the bottom line to try and increase profits, to improve efficiency, and thirdly, to reduce infrastructure costs. So maybe sort of quickly running through them in reverse. So reducing infrastructure costs, often here we're looking at the maintenance costs of databases and platforms incurred across the enterprise. And so this goes from sort of the large scale project costs to indirect costs needed to reconcile inconsistencies across systems and during system migrations. We often also help reduce the cost of third-party data providers. There's improved efficiency, which often I think for our sort of core users within the data org is the benefit that they get most excited about, really reducing all that time spent on manual effort. And then our primary bucket, so the number one and where the value really comes from, it's about how the business is using the data. And so here we'll break it down into the real drivers. So either driving revenue, decreasing costs, or reducing risks. And there's nuance here depending on naturally the entity we're looking at. So here for customer data, we've listed some of the core impacts that the data tends to drive, aspects like upsell and cross-sell opportunities within an account. Really, really difficult if you don't have a unified customer view to know what products you could be recommending, how to approach the account to expand, because you're lacking the information, often sometimes in embarrassing levels where you can't tell the customer about their existing exposure unless you have that unified view. But also aspects like targeted marketing, increasing sales and marketing efficiency as well. And then risk, which tends to be a really prevalent focus within our financial services customers. And so really boiling that back to some of the customers that we're working with and thinking through that customer data. I kind of said that it is customer specific, and I think the customer data example brings it to life. So here in our examples, you can see that the focus could be from know your customer, KYC regulation in finance with Scotiabank, for example, customer experience in manufacturing, also our Toyota experience, and aspects like distributor data, sales, different sales channels, and improving sales lead matches for analog devices. So really a breadth within that of kind of how customer data specifically is sort of impacting our customers. So I think as a final note, before we'd love to jump into some quick Q&A and any questions that you have, please do enter them in the chat. It's always our favorite part of the session is getting to hear your feedback. One element that we wanted to mention before jumping into that is that we have this offer at the moment in terms of sponsoring your first either customers, whether it's customers or organizations, so B2B, or supplier mastering projects that we're taking on that first project. I think we have conviction that we can add value very quickly and sort of prove it out with that initial sort of use case. And so we want to make sure that you're able to take that leap to get started with a cloud native MDM approach. So if it's something that would interest you, if you'd like to discuss sort of more specifically for use cases that you have in mind and see a demo, please do follow up with us. We'd love the chance to chat with you. So with that, I think we'll move to Q&A.
Well, thanks very much, Louise and Richie. Excellent demo. There's a lot to take in there. And how does this compare to someone like it's obviously enterprise class, someone like an Informatica? How do you kind of see yourselves stacking up there?
Yeah, I'd probably put Informatica in the category of those traditional MDM vendors. There's some good tech there, and the idea of MDM has been popular for a lot of companies, but what we found from speaking to a lot of these companies is that they've underestimated the amount of work involved in a traditional MDM implementation. And actually a lot of MDM projects fail because of this. In order for them to work, they often involve large teams of people, huge planning effort, implementation periods that take longer than expected. The Tamer approach is quite different. The human-guided machine learning workflow allows Tamer to be very agile and very fast. Instead of spending months planning, you can start looking at the results almost immediately and then quickly iterate from there. So yeah, that's what it's about looking at the results straight away and then iterating. And agility is very important because a lot of the times you don't know what to expect until you see the output.
We have a couple of other questions, and I want to be sensitive to to kind of having enough time to get ready for the next one. But with regard to that that last screen you showed, Louise, with the idea of how to engage in a trial effectively, I thought that was very good of you to share. I'm curious, with regard to deployment of Tamer, how long of a process are we looking at?
Yeah, absolutely. Richie, do you want to kind of chat through it from what you've seen? I mean, typically we are talking about a much shorter timeline, which I think we've hit on. But Richie, you can feel free to expand.
Yeah, I mean, so I think Louise mentioned, our three big cloud partners, which is Azure, AWS, and Google Cloud Platform. If you're on one of those three, you can have a Tamer up and running in minutes. Okay. Some of our customers prefer to have a SaaS model where we host everything for them, and that's an option too, and that's even easier. But really, getting Tamer up and running, it's a matter of minutes, and then getting all the data in and building and training an ML model and looking at the results. We're talking maybe a few weeks.
Interesting.
To add on to what Rishi said, and I think another element as well is really getting access to the data. So I think from the enterprise side, we're not talking about trivial systems. We're really thinking enterprise wide, and that often is a hurdle that our customers have to sort of overcome internally, and many do quickly. But I think it's the realities of taking on enterprise scale data challenges is that sometimes their own internal challenges as well of gaining access to data can be real.
Well, and do you help them with that? Help them think that through in terms of what data they seem to have, ready access to, and maybe others that they need a little bit of help with?
No, absolutely. Yeah. Within our team, we really focus on kind of being sort of thought leaders from a data ops perspective. We have, great sort of engineering talent, and I think they often act as sort of key advisors on that of trying to think through how to get started, because often you don't want to sort of take on sometimes the most sort of difficult edge case within it, right? It's often about figuring out what you can get access to in a time efficient manner and building from there and working from there. But we as a company try and take on every data situation, no matter how messy it is. That's kind of our approach is always to kind of work through it, no matter sort of what the incumbent challenges are that have built up with legacy systems.
Well, Louise, Richie, thank you very much for sharing the Tamer value proposition and the story there. It's certainly compelling, and we would encourage all of our viewers to learn more. And so we will catch you later. We'll certainly be covering more of what Tamer's up to here at Solutions Review. But again, thanks very much for being with us.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thanks, Doug.
We want to thank you all very much for being a part of this, and we look forward to having you be a part of our next one. Thanks.